Movie World and Dreamworld are two of Australia's most iconic theme park destinations. The two parks have always somewhat been in competition with one another. And in 2024, both parks debuted the opening of their own individual precincts targeted at family demographics. Movie World, with the Wizard of Oz precinct themed after the iconic Hollywood classic film of the same title, and Dreamworld's reimagining of a classic area, Rivertown. Not only are both precincts aimed at a similar audience, but both feature coasters manufactured by Vekoma. It's almost like the two theme parks are going punch for punch in preparation for the upcoming surge of tourists when the Brisbane Olympics roll around in 2032. But which is better, the Wizard of Oz at Movie World or Rivertown at Dreamworld? Well, in today's video, I'm going to give my own personal opinion, and to keep it relatively unbiased, I'll break down my thoughts into somewhat objective categories to make it easier to decide. The first thing most guests look at when visiting any popular theme park would have to be the rides. So what do these new precincts have in store? Let's start with Movie World. The Wizard of Oz precinct's number of rides is up for debate. We'll come back to that in a minute. So for simplicity's sake, I'll just say there are two. The first being Kansas Twister, a Vekoma boomerang racer themed to the Twister from the Wizard of Oz movie. This coaster has guests seated on separate trains themed to tractors which then exit the station directly into a backwards lift hill. They then proceed to plunge down and race through the station again, before weaving and winding through a cornfield. The two coasters then reach a spike and repeat the course backwards until they reach the initial lift hill, which then gently drops them back into the station. This is an excellent family coaster, which is very smooth and enjoyable. The operations are relatively quick, so you don't have to wait for too long to get on the ride. The ride length isn't the longest, but it is long enough to be enjoyable, and having the two separate paths gives Kansas Twister a lot of re-rideability. The next coaster is Flight of the Wicked Witch, a Vekoma suspended family coaster themed to the flying monkeys from the Wizard of Oz film. That's right, these terrifying things. Flight of the Wicked Witch is actually the same coaster and layout as TNT at Movie World in Victoria, a coaster which I absolutely love. This ride is slightly more thrilling than Kansas Twister, with quite an intense first drop which plummets down through a tunnel before soaring off through the rest of the run, with some nice helixes and bunny hops. This is a great ride, but unfortunately it's only able to run one train, which makes the wait time quite long, which is something else I'll come back to soon when I talk about the theming. Overall, this is an excellent attraction which I look forward to re-riding, but given that the same ride exists at Movie World in Victoria, I wouldn't race to Movie World to ride this coaster specifically. Now let's head down the road to Rivertown at Dreamworld. The first new ride available here is Murrissippi Motors. Well, I say new, but it's actually a repurposed and reimagined version of the Vintage Cars ride, and also a throwback to the original Murrissippi Motors that used to be located near the Tower of Terror back in the day. It's difficult to talk about this ride without bringing up the theming, which I'll come back to soon, but this is an excellent family attraction which guests of any age can enjoy at their own pace. The layout is relatively long and enjoyable, with lots of interesting twists and turns and changes in altitude. That sounds like a weird way to phrase it, but what I mean is during the ride you find yourself going through lots of types of terrain, uphill, downhill, and through streams of water. The wait time is slightly longer though, simply due to the nature of the attraction. The next attraction is Jungle Rush, a Vekoma family coaster, the first of its kind, which they're calling a switchback roller coaster. It features the world's first inclined turntable, which means that each ride cycle can be a little bit different and unique. Because of this, the ride length can vary greatly depending on the season and number of guests. Theoretically, they can make this coaster run for as long as they like in a continuous cycle. Does that mean this could technically be the longest coaster in the world? You're able to choose if you want to leave the station forwards or backwards, but because of the inclined turntable, you're basically guaranteed to go forwards and backwards on any cycle. And they seem to frequently be running two trains, so the queue times aren't too bad. Again, it's difficult to talk about this ride without bringing up theming, which I'll get back to soon. Anyway, I absolutely love this coaster. I think it's such a unique attraction with some incredible surprises. Depending on where you sit, it can be quite forceful with some decent airtime and forces. This ride has massive re-rideability, and I'm still yet to experience all the possible variations. So which park has the better ride experiences? Well, my personal pick would have to be Dreamworld, simply due to the uniqueness of both the new rides. Don't get me wrong, the rides at the Wizard of Oz precinct are excellent additions, but as they're essentially cut and paste clones of other rides, they lose a few points due to uniqueness. Having great rides is one thing, but the packaging and presentation is another, which brings us to the next section, theming. This is entirely personal, but you could have the most thrilling, record-breaking, insane roller coaster on the planet with no theming. But if across the road there was a less thrilling ride, but with amazing world-class theming, I would go to that one every single time. And this isn't a spoiler at all. Both Wizard of Oz and Rivertown feature incredible world-class theming. Neither one is perfect, so I'll try to give an honest and fair opinion on both areas. Just to shift things around a bit, let's start off with Rivertown at Dreamworld. The first impressions are very strong, with an incredible themed entrance sign. This thing has so much detail. It's weathered, aged, with lots of perfect imperfections, including cute little signs jutting off, pointing to different areas of the land. Walking under the entrance arch, you're greeted with a really cool truck or jeep of some kind. Please don't kill me, car enthusiasts. I don't know exactly what this is, but it does look cool. This thing appears to have been in some kind of accident during an adventure and crashed. This is thematically interesting because right off the bat you get the impression that Rivertown is somewhere where there's adventure and excitement. On the left you have the Rivertown General Store, which is a retheme of the motor coaster store and exit. Now, the inside of this shop is very nice. It's somewhat minimalistic while still thematically fitting in with the Rivertown area. You've got another vehicle and a really cool logo and sign painted on the wall. The shop has lots of goodies themed to Jungle Rush. Again, we'll come back to the merch later on. And it also appears to be where you find the photos for Murrissippi Motors. This is all great. Now for the not so great. The outside is just kinda ugly. I get it. They had to retheme it to fit it in with the new Rivertown area. But if I'm going to give a fair review of each park, I need to be 100% honest about my opinions. And honestly, the store just kind of sticks out. But I won't spend too much time being negative, because it's easy to forget about that as you continue walking down to watch the first attraction, Murrissippi Motors. I mentioned earlier that this attraction is hard to talk about without bringing up the theming. Just look at it. This ride is crazy. It takes up a large portion of the Rivertown area, with so much attention to detail and things to look at. Temples, artifacts, animals, waterfalls, an actual caribou jet right in the middle of the ride, which they rethemed just for the area. Wait a second, what? That's right, this thing is gigantic, and it's just casually plonked down as if it's completely normal. This ride is incredibly well themed, world class, and probably my favorite vintage cars attraction anywhere in the world. And it's only going to get better with time. Once all the plants and trees grow in, this will seriously feel like exploring a mysterious jungle. Which brings me to the next point about the theming here. Although it's something I can't really complain about because it is something that will be fixed naturally over time. But the sight lines with the old Tower of Terror Q-line building looming in the distance do, unfortunately, slightly take you out of the experience. However, as I said, once the plants and trees grow in and the train tracks are put back in place, I'm pretty certain this won't be a problem whatsoever, and I won't have anything left to complain about except maybe it being too immersive. The station for Murrissippi Motors is also lovely with these awesome Kenny and Belinda figures located at the front, alongside a test car which also doubles up as a photo opportunity. Very smart decision. The queue line and stations are really nicely themed to a kind of jungle explorer type vibe, which reminds me a lot of Jungle Cruise, which I recently rode at both Hong Kong Disneyland and Tokyo Disneyland. It's lovely to have a shaded area to wait in, which is cool, especially during the summer months. Again, I'll come back to this later. The cars themselves are lovely. They were originally going to tweak the cars to be electric, but eventually decided not to. And environmental reasons aside, I do really enjoy the experience of riding these lovely old cars. Hearing the engine and feeling it rumble, as well as the smell from the cars. It's incredibly authentic and adds so much to the experience. Riding through this attraction is an absolute joy. Incredibly relaxing and well-themed with so much to look at. Hit for people of all ages. Exiting Murrissippi Motors and making your way along the Murrissippi River is really peaceful and scenic. They've done a great job at shifting the pathway closer to the actual river, and there's a little dock area which seems suspiciously perfect for a future addition such as a boat ride, or perhaps even a bridge across to the island. I personally think something like Tarzan's treehouse at Hong Kong Disneyland would fit in perfectly here, or a jungle cruise type attraction, or even another throwback to the old paddle steamer. Except for the old Tower of Terror building, the sightlines in Rivertown are absolutely top-notch, with the incredible Jungle Rush building looming in the distance. It really is the centerpiece of the area. Walt Disney had a phrase for this kind of thing. He called it a weenie. I know, weird name. Something that draws your eye towards it and makes you want to go and see what it is. And Jungle Rush 100% fits this description. The temple is enormous and it's hard to miss. With the coaster popping out of different areas of the temple, it's such an incredible design and really makes you want to explore. Approaching the temple, it's so much larger than you realize, with the impressive entrance logo looming above. Walking into the queue, it's immediately the best themed queue in Australia, hands down. The attention to detail, lighting, and atmosphere is so immersive, you really do forget you're in Dreamworld. My favorite part of the queue is the snake room, with the amazing audio from the inclined turntable room which can be heard from here. You can also see the coaster going through the indoor section through the snake-eye windows. The station itself is very nice, but they do have these TV screens which ruin the immersion a little bit. They don't seem to play anything at the moment, but maybe they have something planned for the future. There aren't currently any on-ride POVs of the coaster itself, but the theming inside is really great. It's not as intricate as on the outside or in the queue line, but there is enough to keep it interesting with lots of hidden details that make the rewritability even better. Inside the inclined turntable room, if you look down you can see a few large snakes, hopefully statues or animatronics and not real snakes. The audio is the absolute highlight of this section for me. It's similar to a kind of low Mongolian throat singing type sound, very bassy, and the speakers are really loud so the bass is super resonant and bone shaking. Once you're on the outside sections, the location really speaks for itself. It's absolutely incredible whipping around the Rivertown area, past Murrissippi Motors and a few little bunny hop hills close by to the river. The theming here is absolutely world class, and as I said, it's only going to improve once all the plants grow in. I can't wait to see what the area looks like at nighttime. The other attraction for the area is Jane's Rivertown restaurant, which I'll come back to when I talk about food and merchandise. Overall, Rivertown's theming is absolutely mind-blowing. It's hard to believe that something like this exists in Australia, let alone at Dreamworld, in the same plot of land where not long ago the apocalyptic Wiggles land was sitting and decaying. They not only created an entirely new area, but repurposed an old decrepit space and flipped it into something incredible. Now let's hop back over to Movie World and travel down the yellow brick road to the merry old land of Oz. The first impressions of the Wizard of Oz land are mixed. The entrance sign is beautiful. It's a very highly detailed and lovely tribute to the four iconic characters from the film. It's a great photo opportunity, and it's touching to see lots of people connecting with the original film. You'll see people of all ages and backgrounds stopping by to have a look and snap a photo. The film is a beloved classic after all, and many people have fond memories and nostalgia around watching the film growing up, as do I. It is a slightly strange spot for it though, right in the front of the brake run for Superman Escape. I can't help getting a bit of tonal whiplash from the juxtaposition of the beautiful Somewhere Over the Rainbow playing, and the screaming from Superman Escape. I suppose the park is slightly stretched when it comes to spaces for these kinds of things, so it is understandable, but compared to Rivertown at Dreamworld, this is not nearly as immersive. I personally feel like the photo opportunity would have been better placed inside the actual precinct. Moving on past Superman Escape, you follow the yellow brick road to the actual entrance to the land, under a beautiful archway, through a rainbow. This is a really simple but nice touch. It is quite a narrow walkway, however, and many people stop in the middle for photos, which is understandable because it does look really cool. But you can't help feeling like you're walking through a minefield, trying to avoid ruining people's photos. This probably isn't a problem for most people, but I'm a people pleaser and don't want my ugly face to be in someone else's picture. Passing through the rainbow, you arrive at the centerpiece of the area, and the most impressive, the Emerald Palace in Munchkinland. The palace itself is extremely well themed. It's really beautiful and impressive, and another great photo opportunity. The only downside is you can't really see it from the rest of the park. You would think this would be a great equivalent of a Disney castle, something that can be seen from lots of different areas of the park that draws guests in. Don't get me wrong, You can see parts of it, but not the themed parts. Approaching Oz, you can see the back of it, which is kind of strange and ruins the immersion. As for the rest of the area, it is quite nice. I think the Munchkinland was a little too small, and personally I think it would be a great spot for a playground or something rather than just a backdrop. Maybe it's my personal taste, but I think that if you can turn something into an interactive element, you should. The rest of the area is quite open and feels a bit desolate and empty. I think it would be a great space for some seating or stalls selling food, drinks or merchandise. Again, I'll come back to this soon. Another thing which kind of takes you out of it is the giant Scooby-Doo show building looming above the area. This is quite a large building, so I suppose there isn't much they could do to disguise it, but even painting it the same green would kind of help. Heading inside the Emerald Palace, you enter a really impressive large room, which leads off into the 2 queues for Kansas Twister and Flight of the Wicked Witch. I really like this room. It's air-conditioned and a nice escape from the harsh Queensland sun. It's got some projections of clips from the original film playing on the walls, as well as an impressive projection hologram of the wizard who has some dialogue. Unfortunately, there is only one cycle of dialogue, so it does get quite repetitive and doesn't have much replay value. The room does feel quite cavernous and could definitely use some seating and tables. A lot of people just come in here and sit on the floor and lean against the wall to cool down. I personally think this also would have been a perfect spot for a little dining experience or cafe, similar to something like the Blue Bayou and Pirates of the Caribbean at Disney parks. It wouldn't take up much space and it would be a really nice place to come and sit. Moving on to the queue line for Kansas Twister, you pass through a somewhat minimalistically themed hallway and exit into an outdoor area outside Dorothy's house from the movie. The house itself is really cool. As a huge film buff, seeing stuff like this is awesome. You walk through the house, which is on an angle, and the windows have screens outside playing a tornado effect. It's very loud with the sound effects of the twister, and the lights are swinging. You also see Dorothy's bed and photo from the film. The illusion is slightly ruined by the old Arkham show building, which the house is actually inside of. They've done a fairly decent job at disguising it, but it isn't as immersive as it could be. Still really cool. Exiting the house, you enter the outside queue area. You can see the barn in the distance, which is the station for Kansas Twister. I'm a huge fan of the cow on the roof. It's a nice silly touch. The rest of the area is pretty empty when it comes to theming. There are some cornfields inside the coaster area, but there are so many black fences everywhere, it's really hard to feel immersed or even notice the theming. One really cool thing about Oz is how accessible it is for guests with disabilities. There's lots of elevators and other things used to assist people with these requirements, and they do an amazing job at integrating them into the land. For instance, the huge water tank outside the barn is actually an elevator, which is pretty awesome. Huge props to Movie World for this. It's something I feel like doesn't really get talked about. Before you enter the barn building, a staff member points you to either the yellow track, which you enter on the left, or the orange track, which you enter on the right. The orange track takes you up a flight of stairs and across to the other side of the barn. You can get some really cool views of the coaster from here, but hanging around for too long isn't really encouraged. One thing the Wizard of Oz area is missing is some good spots to actually watch or film the coasters from. There's so many black fences, it's hard to get many good views. The trains for Kansas Twister are so cool. Big fan. They're themed to tractors with some very nice logos on them. They're quite comfortable, but if you're tall like me, they can be a bit challenging to get into. Unfortunately, there isn't really any thematic theming inside the station. What do I mean by that? Well, the ride is themed to the Twister, but there isn't really any indication inside the station of this, story-wise. I was kind of hoping there would be some themed audio or dialogue, for instance, or maybe some things swaying around like inside Dorothy's house. Maybe this is something they'll add in the future. I've already covered the coaster itself, which I love, but there isn't too much theming throughout the experience, except for corn and a station wagon, which, don't get me wrong, are nice, but they aren't super impressive. Another thing which destroys any chance of immersion is the side lanes here. There isn't really any effort to disguise the show buildings or neighbouring film lot, which is quite disappointing. Even as someone actively interested in filmmaking, I still find it a shame that there isn't much theming to look at. You can see all the back of house stuff, which, as a guest, definitely pulls you out of it. It's not badly themed by any means. They clearly had limitations, although there are claims that $100 million was spent on the precinct. Obviously, I'm no expert in theme park finance or anything like that, but compared to Rivertown, which I believe was a slightly smaller budget, it does make me wonder where all the money went. Please don't get angry at me for this, I'm just genuinely confused why so much of the theming side of the area feels incomplete. Without sounding too cynical, it almost feels like it actually is incomplete. Exiting Kansas Twister, you walk through a maze of, you've got it, black fences, which honestly resemble a prison. There's absolutely nothing to look at here. It's extremely bland and depressing, which I hate to say because I really wanted it to be good. I promise. I have no reason to be a grumpy old man about this. I just genuinely wanted a really nice area, and some of it is really nice, but stuff like this just ruins it just a little bit, and I can't really ignore it because I have eyes. You exit into the area where you collect photos from, which is quite nice, and it's shaded, but it's in a really awkward spot where the foot traffic gets so heavy you can't really stick around. It's almost like they designed the area to just get you in and out as fast as possible before you can register the black fencing. There's a bathroom and area to wait outside Kansas Twister, but this has absolutely no theming and gives you a clear view of all the back of house stuff. Let's check out Flight of the Wicked Witch. Once again, you enter through the Emerald Palace. Similarly to Kansas Twister, this starts off great, with you beginning in a mirror room full of roses, which looks incredible. There is some kind of green orb and audio from the Wicked Witch. I was expecting something to appear inside the orb, like on the Haunted Mansion at Disney, but nothing happens. This is another reason I feel like the area is genuinely unfinished, and they perhaps just rushed it open in response to Rivertown and Dreamworld opening before then. You then move through into an amazing dark forest area, which I absolutely love. I'm a huge fan of all things spooky, so this is somewhere I could see myself settling down in. Again, it does feel like it's missing something. I mean, this is themed to the Wicked Witch and the Flying Monkeys after all, so some themed audio or animatronics or something would have been really amazing. Moving past this room, you enter an outdoor area. This was probably one of the biggest letdowns. It's just completely unthemed except for a few dead trees and vultures. There's basically no shade either, so in the Gold Coast weather it's basically unbearable to wait outside here. Since opening, they have changed it so that they keep guests in the dark forest and let them through group by group so they don't have to wait, which is good damage control, but it also shows a clear lack of planning or guest testing. The Witch's Castle looks kind of cool on the outside, especially towards the actual entrance with some nice themed fencing, which makes me wonder why they didn't use this fencing for the rest of the area. It would have been much nicer than the horrible black fencing. There's a really cool flying monkey gargoyle lurking above the doorway, which I love. And as you enter, there's some more gargoyles on the roof, as well as a spellbook, which unfortunately, given the way the queue line is designed, you don't really get any opportunity to look at these things in depth. That's about as far as the theming for this coaster goes. Again, I really wish it was otherwise. I had huge expectations as a big fan of the film as well as Wicked, but unfortunately this not only didn't live up to my expectations, but actually left me with a really sour taste as a guest. There's basically no detail on the inside of the castle, which is disappointing because when you think of a spooky castle, you think of something dark with lots of cracks and weathered details. But this looks pristine and brand new, like it's just a bunch of concrete. The station itself is even more of a letdown. After Leviathan opened at SeaWorld, I was expecting something of a similar quality, but there's basically nothing in here except a mural of the flying monkeys, which is nice, but definitely not what you would expect from a world-class attraction themed to a beloved IP. The coaster experience has basically no theming either, except for the same dead trees you see from the queue line. Unfortunately, a big disappointment in that department. The coaster itself is excellent, but it's really let down by the lack of theming. Surprisingly, TNT at Gumbaya World was actually better themed than this, and I'm sure their budget pales in comparison to what Movie World is able to get. Again, I'm not a financial expert, so don't quote me on this. It's just an honest opinion from a guest's perspective. I feel awful nitpicking the theming so much because I don't really have any reason to hate on Movie World at all. I think my expectations were just so high for the whole area, and I don't think I'm entirely to blame for that. The lead up to the Oz opening was kind of kept under wraps, and we didn't even know it was opening until literally the night before it happened. Up until then, previews inside the land were kind of scarce. Movie World shared some teasers and things, but it still seemed like it was a work in progress. And it's not like I'm saying everything about the area is bad. There's heaps of stuff I love, but it just feels a little bit undercooked. The stuff that works for the area is genuinely really great. I just wish it was more consistent. It's a shame, because The Wizard of Oz is such a classic IP which so many people connect with. I feel like if you've got this IP to one of the most iconic films of all time, you become a custodian of sorts, and you have a responsibility to respect and do that IP justice. It's not something you can afford to pull any punches with, which is why overall the area leaves me with a sour taste. It does feel like there were a few shortcuts made, and perhaps the area was opened before it was actually ready. So which precinct has the better theming? Rivertown or Oz? Well, in my personal opinion, Rivertown wins this category. But to be fair, you can have amazing, unique rides and great theming, but what about other experiences and amenities to keep you immersed in the area, such as shows, food, merchandise, and more? Well, let's take a look and see what else these two precincts offer. Let's head back across to Rivertown and see what else they offer in their new precinct. Starting off, you have the Rivertown General Store, which I briefly touched upon earlier when I was talking about the theming. But how is the merch selection? Well, it's decent. They do have some new Jungle Rush themed merchandise such as t-shirts, cups, and drink holders. They also have some generic animal plushies which are cute but don't really feel exclusive to the area. A while ago, Dreamworld created these new mascot characters which have yet to appear in the actual park. I'm not sure if they're planned to be a part of Rivertown, but they would be perfect characters for meet and greets, which is one thing the area is sorely missing. The Rivertown area does have some backstory and lore with Jane and Murray, the two explorer siblings who stumbled across the area. But one thing that it does feel like it's missing is a clear storyline interweaved into the area through performances or characters and meet and greets. It's such a beautiful area, but other than the rides, it could definitely use with some more interactive elements for guests looking to do something else after visiting rides or eating. There's currently no shows or meet and greets that I'm aware of in the area, but that could change in the future. Just past Jungle Rush is Rivertown's food offering, Jane's Rivertown Restaurant, which is absolutely delightful. It's where the old Billabong restaurant used to be, which I never ate at, but the area has been sitting dormant, so it's nice to see it being used for something again. The restaurant itself is incredibly well themed and decorated, with heaps of animatronics and thematic elements such as temple artifacts, treasures, and antiques. I've made a separate video covering the restaurant itself, which you can check out on my channel, but I absolutely adore this place, and I would include it as an attraction in its own right. The food and drink selection is great, with reasonable pricing, and lots of options for dietary requirements. Another thing I love about this place is the amount of throwbacks to classic Dreamworld they have around. There's heaps of old photos and posters of past Dreamworld attractions. It's great seeing them honor their roots in such a nice way. It's really chilled out, with great service and an amazing animatronic orangutan. What else can you ask for? Other than the merch in the restaurant, Dreamworld doesn't really have anything else at the moment. Like I say, that could change, but I'm not privy to Dreamworld's future plans. I wish I was. In terms of the overall experience of the area, it's a lovely place to wander around and have a sit. Thankfully, there's lots of places to sit around the area, which is great. It can get quite hot in the day, and there isn't too much shade in the main walkway, which I hope they'll look into. Maybe this will be different once some of the trees grow in, but it could definitely use with some umbrellas or shade. Now back to Movie World, starting off with merchandise. Well, again, this is a bit of a mixed bag, because the merchandise selection for Oz is actually really good. Lots of character merch, such as little character headband things, t-shirts, plushes, such as cute little Toto toys, and these amazing flying monkey plushies, and more. It's a great selection, although I can't imagine wearing some of the things they sell here. I do wish they went for more of a classic look for some of the merchandise, but I'm more of a classic guy, and other people might not necessarily have the same taste as me, so that's kind of subjective. Anyway, solid selection. The only problem is the only place you can buy the merch is all the way in this shop on Main Street. Nowhere near the Wizard of Oz precinct at all, which is frankly bizarre. I get that Movie World maybe wants to keep most of its shops in one area, but you would think that they would make an absolute fortune selling merch in the land where people are most likely to want to buy it. Even if they had some stalls or something selling merchandise like the character headbands, I feel like they would be much more likely to sell merchandise, and it would also fill out the area quite nicely and give it a bit more life. I recently visited Disneyland and Disney Sea in Tokyo, and one thing that was selling like hotcakes there were balloons, which to me is a no-brainer because of the hot air balloons from the original Wizard of Oz movie. They could sell balloons with the characters' faces on them. I guarantee these would sell like crazy. What about food? Unfortunately, the Wizard of Oz precinct has no food or drinks available inside, which again is bizarre. This is another reason they say that the area feels like it's designed to get you in and out as fast as possible, rather than creating an environment that you would want to stick around in. Again, even if they had some little stalls selling themed snacks, like candy apples themed to the witch, or flying monkey churros, or popcorn, or corn on the cob, they would make a fortune. There are some Oz-themed snacks and drinks at Movie World, but they're nowhere near the actual land, which is just mind-boggling to me. They could even put something inside the Emerald Palace, like a small cafe or something, which would be an awesome place to relax. The location alone would be a great competitor to Jane's Rivertown restaurant at Dreamworld. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of things you would expect to be default offerings that aren't anywhere to be seen in the area, such as shade, tables, seats. That's right, there's basically nowhere to sit in the Wizard of Oz precinct, which is pretty ludicrous. So you see people sitting on the fountain area where the character meet and greets take place, or inside the Emerald Palace against the wall. The lack of shade is a massive problem because much of the area is exposed to sunlight basically all day, which definitely makes it look nice, but makes it extremely unpleasant to stand around in. There's also a lack of water fountains and rubbish bins in the area, so it's pretty common to see trash or bottles lying around. On one of my visits, I found a Hungry Jack's bag sitting in one of the flower pots. The lack of water fountains is a huge problem in my opinion, because if you're waiting around in the baking hot sun, you're going to want to stay hydrated. But if you haven't brought your bottle with you, or if you did and you need to refill it, the only way to do that is to walk all the way back to the front of the park. And it's not like this is a way to make more money for Movie World, because they don't even sell any drinks in the Wizard of Oz area. It just feels sloppy and unfinished and anti-consumer.
Hey, future Mr. Yum Yum here. One thing I realized I forgot to include when I was recording this video was that Rivertown at Dreamworld also doesn't have any water fountains, so I felt like if I wanted to be fully honest and transparent, I needed to include that as well. But the reason I wasn't as scathing about that was you're at least able to purchase drinks within the area at Jane's Rivertown restaurant, which also offers complimentary water, I believe. Anyway, back to the video.
I'm probably sounding very negative right now, and frankly, I do think it's quite irresponsible not to have some of these things like shade or drinks or seating. But there is one thing I think is excellent about the area, and that's the character meet and greets and shows. The iconic characters from the film frequently come out, sometimes performing a song. The performers at Movie World are probably the highlight of the entire park for me. I think they're so talented and friendly and make the park experience extremely enjoyable. It's definitely a world-class aspect of the park, and something I look forward to every time I visit. So Movie World definitely beats Dreamworld in that regard. But who wins in this category overall? Well, although I do love the characters and meet and greets at Movie World, the guest experience always comes first, and no guest is going to have an enjoyable time standing around in the boiling hot sun with no drinks and no shade. Dreamworld has put much more effort into making Rivertown an enjoyable area to spend long amounts of time in with their seating and restaurant, and although they're currently missing meet and greets and shows, I still think the overall experience in this regard is better. Now for my final and possibly most important category, longevity. With any new addition to a theme park, it's important to think about the future of the area, how well it will age and be maintained, and room for growth with new attractions and experiences. So let's have a think about what the future of these two new areas might look like before I give my final thoughts. Starting off with the Wizard of Oz precinct. It's difficult to talk about the longevity of this area because so much of it feels incomplete. When I think about the future of Oz, I think it will just get closer to what my initial expectation of the area actually was. Perhaps they'll finish off some of the theming and replace the prison-like maze of black fences. Maybe they'll add some of the bare minimum things like drinks, shade, and seating. but that doesn't really fill me with too much excitement. Other than that, I'm not really sure what else they could add to the area, except maybe some shows and meet and greets. I would love to see an addition of a costume character, flying monkey, similar to the toy that they sell in the shop. I think this would be really fun and something kids would feel less frightened of, because frankly some of the Oz characters are quite scary and strange looking. Like the lion freaks me out. I'm also interested to see how they'll use the area for nighttime events. That is, if they do. The area wasn't open during White Christmas, unfortunately. I think the Emerald Palace would look amazing lit up at nighttime, and it would be a great spot for some kind of projection mapping show or fireworks. I'm also curious if they'll use the area during Fright Nights and Halloween or not. I'm also unsure how well the land will age. I've already noticed some signs of decay, such as the paint on the flower petals and the fountain peeling away. I'm concerned that the area won't get the TLC it deserves when I think of things like the queue line for Scooby-Doo, where there's lots of graffiti and names carved into the wall. I think a lot of that is down to the precedent the theme park sets. For example, if someone carved their name into the wall and Movie World got rid of it immediately, then it wouldn't be an issue. But when something like that persists for so long and they don't do anything about it, it just invites guests to do more stupid stuff like that, which I'm not saying is the case for this new area, but just given some other areas of the park, it does give me some feelings of concern. And I get it, there are lots of budget and other constraints and things I have no idea about, and it's easy to dismiss my opinion or anyone's opinion if they're not an expert theme park designer, but the one thing I think all businesses should pay huge attention to is the guests' experience, because after all, the guests are the ones coming to visit these places and they do know their own taste. When people give feedback, it's important not to just dismiss it, because you're hearing directly from the actual people experiencing your product and whether or not they enjoy it. So these opinions aren't really things you can easily just brush off. I am trying to look at it fairly objectively, and I think I'm giving a relatively fair assessment. I'm trying not to be too negative. In summary, I'm unsure about the future of Oz, because so much of it feels like it's built on unstable foundations. It feels a bit like a house of cards, just barely holding together. It's hard to imagine anything new being added to it without other areas crumbling, which makes me kind of sad. And I know I'm sounding very negative, but I'm not trying to decry any of the hard work or anything that the creative team and workers put into the area, because I've seen it firsthand how hard everyone's worked on it, and I really respect and admire everything that's gone into it. I suppose if I did have anything to nitpick, it might just be more of like a philosophy, company's philosophy about quality. Creative people are like children in a sandbox. They just want to play. And I'm saying this as a creative person. You just want to make stuff, and you're in the sandbox and you're sculpting things with your buckets and your spades. But at a certain point you run out of sand. You're kind of limited by the sandbox that you're given, the size of the sandbox, the amount of sand. And if there's areas of the precinct that don't work, you know, it reflects badly on the creative people and the workers. That's a shame, because they've got nothing to do with that. The good stuff about the area works incredibly well, and I think it's excellent, but it's just clear that they weren't given a big enough sandbox for their talents, and that makes me sad. So no shade to the creative people, or the workers, or the staff, or anything like that. Now, what about Rivertown at Dreamworld? This area, on the other hand, I have extremely high hopes for. As I mentioned earlier, the area feels like it's certainly going to improve. Dreamworld's done a great job in the past few years at not only setting a new standard, but maintaining that standard. They're incredibly consistent. Rivertown is going to look amazing once all the plants and trees grow in, which hopefully will provide a bit more shade. Dreamworld is also a bit more active in listening to guest feedback and making changes to improve the experience. I'm sure they'll add shade to the area, and I'm pretty certain that they have some character meet and greets planned. They've built a really strong foundation for the area that feels reliable, and I can easily imagine new changes and additions being made to the area, such as the potential re-theme of the motor coaster ride nearby, and maybe the addition of a new attraction along the riverside. There's also lots of future events to look forward to, such as the new Dreamworld After Dark events coming in 2025, which will allow us to enjoy the park and rides in the evening. I'm really excited to see what the area looks like at nighttime. I'm unsure if Dreamworld will add any kind of show to the area. I think it would be a really great addition, but so far they don't seem to have anything like that at the park. So who wins for future potential and longevity? Well, once again, it's Dreamworld. And that brings us to the question you've all been waiting to hear. Which is better? The Wizard of Oz precinct at Movie World or Rivertown at Dreamworld? It's probably no surprise, but in my honest opinion, I think that Rivertown is a far superior area out of the two. It's clear that there were no shortcuts or punches pulled in this area. The love and attention to detail is honestly mind-blowing for an Australian park. They've truly created something world-class, which is definitely a reason to visit the park. The future is looking really good for the area and Dreamworld as a whole, if this is the level of quality they're pushing themselves to create. Just to end things, I will say that both precincts are great additions to their respective parks, and we're extremely lucky to have these brilliant new areas to explore and enjoy at our theme parks here in Australia. I hope I didn't give an overly negative impression about some areas, because overall I really enjoyed both precincts for what they are. But sometimes you do have to be honest if you want to give a clear answer. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching my video. What do you think? Which precinct do you prefer? Let me know in the comments, and if you want to see more videos like this, let me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe too for more if you feel like it. Bye!